What up, nerd? Long time no see. I've been meaning to make this video for well over a year, more like 2, and I've just never gotten around to it until now. As most of you who watch me over on Twitch will know, a lot of my stream content is high tier tank battles, and being a CAS player, I consequently get a lot of mileage out of rockets and bombs, but also missiles. Missiles, Kath? I hear you ask. Yes, sir, missiles. Air-to-ground missiles. AGMs. AGMs. Whooshy tanky splody angry. Let's talk about what they are, their role on the battlefield, how I use them, and how you too can do that thing. Broadly, and I'm oversimplifying, please don't go mental in the comments, the difference between a rocket and a missile is that missiles have some kind of guidance to get them from point A to point B, whereas rockets, again, broadly speaking, are dumbfired with no guidance and follow a simple ballistic trajectory from launch to target. What this means in terms of War Thunder is that while something like an RP-3, HVAR, SNEB, or S-24, and more on them later, is dumbfired, a missile corrects its trajectory, or is corrected, as it heads towards its target with a variety of systems. Surface-to-air missile, or SAM systems, in-game mostly use radar beam riding, where a missile follows a radar beam from launcher to target. ATGMs, whether launched from a helicopter or a tank, can be guided in a variety of ways. Some aim by hand, some ride in radio or laser beams, some guided by a wire. AGMs work similarly to ATGMs in that the pilot inputs corrections to the system to guide the missile manually, following the missile via a flare on the back. Some missiles have built-in guidance, like a Hellfire, PARS, or AIM-9 Sidewinder. Essentially, a missile that knows where it is because it knows where it isn't, and by subtracting where it is from where it isn't, or where it isn't from where it is, whichever is greater, the guidance system will drive the missile from where it is to where it isn't, to arrive at a position where it wasn't, that it now is. Sorry. We currently don't have any automatically guided air-to-ground missiles on fixed-wing aircraft in War Thunder, although this may change in the future with additions of things like the AGM-65 Maverick or hopefully the AGM-45 Shrike anti-radar missile. That leaves us with some user-aimed missiles. There's two types of control that we typically see on user-aimed missiles, MCLOS and SACLOS. MCLOS stands for Manual Command Line of Sight, whereas SACLOS stands for Semi-Automatic Command Line of Sight. Both systems need a direct line from launcher to target, as the name suggests. To understand the difference in terms of War Thunder, a BMP-1's stock 9M14 missile, or the LFK SS-11 of the 1st Raketen Jagdpanzer are MCLOS, requiring control input to move the missile, whereas tow, hot, or swing-fire missiles, for example, are SACLOS, with the missile generating its own corrections and going wherever the crosshair of the launcher is pointed. As I said, basically, MCLOS requires input on a joystick or similar in the real world, while the sight unit usually stays still, whereas SACLOS units track based on movement of the launcher, you keep the crosshair on the target, and the missile does the corrections. You with me so far? Good. Fun bit of trivia, by the way. A bunch of helicopters use SS-11s, which are MCLOS. They're guided by a joystick, but all of the SS-11s that we have in-game are SACLOS. They're all guided as if they're SACLOS, for some reason, on helicopters. It would be horrible if they were MCLOS, though. As I said, in War Thunder, all of our fixed-wing mounted AGMs are currently MCLOS, meaning you need to bind the correct controls in order to guide the missile in flight, and they will not automatically track to any kind of crosshair. We'll get back to controls in a little bit, but with that said and the groundwork laid, the two main AGMs we see are Bullpups and Nords. AS anti-surface Nords are somewhat less powerful than Bullpups, meaning you more or less have to get a direct hit, whereas Bullpups have a little bit of leniency. AA anti-aircraft Nords are no use against tanks, but can be pretty effective against planes and helicopters as they airburst in proximity, although I wouldn't recommend bringing AA Nords into a ground battle when you could be using AS Nords, as your guns are more than capable of taking out helis and planes. They're both guided in exactly the same way. Give the AAs a shot in head-on engagements in ARB for maximum Jimmy rustling. Bullpups are available on these boys, and Nords are available on these lads. Special mention goes out to the Mirage, which carries the Big Nord. It has almost 100 kilograms more explosive than a normal Nord, but it only carries one. Now you can see pretty clearly which ones are the victors here. The FJ4B VMF-232 is by far the best bullpup delivery system in the game. It's maneuverable enough to dodge SPAA most of the time, and the G91 likewise for Nords. Unfortunately, unless you manage to earn or buy an FJ during the summer 2018 event, it's not really feasible to buy one nowadays, as while it's decent, It's not 300 Gaijin coins decent. Use an A4B for similar results, as maneuverability is key for fighting these SAM systems. Phantoms tend to be a bit too rigid to reliably get missiles on target, as well as being a much bigger target at a higher battle rating. Bullpups fly at approximately 882 kilometers an hour, give or take, so Phantoms will typically fly a bit too fast for you to get a decent handle on your missile's flight path before you need to fully pull off or pancake into the ground, forcing you to slow down prior to firing to be able to even see where the missile is going to guide it, which isn't the best idea against proximity detonation missiles in the absolute unit of a plane that it is. The Scimitar is good, but loses most of its rudder authority at higher speeds, so you need to be mindful of that. You'll notice this leaves a few nations without any kind of AGM. They have to rely on dumb-fired rockets, but a fair few of them are decently powerful, such as the Swedish anti-tank rockets and the Russian S-24s. Combine S-24s with a ballistic computer on the Su-7s and MiG-21s, access through the quick actions menu, and you have a firing platform that rivals the Bullpup in effectiveness. Try to allow your wings to settle before launching, and you'll find them a rival to AGMs in power and kill potential. Remember to turn your ballistic computer off before engaging enemy aircraft, as your gun's point of aim will change if you're aiming towards the ground. Multiple top-tier aircraft have ballistic computers, which creates a constantly computed impact point, or CCIP, for bombs, rockets, and guns. I won't go into exhaustive detail about them because this isn't the focus of this video, but I encourage you to try it out for yourself. Let's get into how I bind my flight controls, and I'll go into a little bit of detail as to why I've set them up this way. I use W and S for elevators, A and D for roll, Q and E for rudder. Pretty standard. I use Shift to throttle up and Space to throttle down, 4 for rockets and AGMs, B for bombs, and C for free look. Shift and Space might seem a tad odd, but it allows me to keep 3 fingers on the flight controls, and I use my pinky to throttle up and my thumb to throttle down. I also use 2 for air-to-air missile prep and 3 to launch them, but that's not super relevant. I use the arrow keys to guide the missiles. This can be done by heading into your aircraft controls and finding the yaw axis for aimed weapons and pitch axis for weapon aiming controls. To do what I do, in yaw axes, set max value to the right arrow and minimum value to the left arrow. In pitch, set maximum to up and minimum to down. This allows us to guide the Bullpup in flight. Set the fire air to ground key to whatever you like, frankly, but I keep mine the same as rockets, as the only aircraft that carries a mix of rockets and AGMs in the same loadout is the Mirage, which is just one AGM. I bind my keys in this manner so that I can use free look and my control keys to move my aircraft while also guiding the missile and keeping my camera static on the target, because I take my hand off the mouse. You won't last long against a Tunguska or Roland if you can't maneuver while your missile is in flight. You need to fly evasively the entire time you're over the battlefield, or otherwise you'll be easy prey. When you hit your fire air to ground key, the missile will release from the pylon as the engine starts and it will take flight. Take note of the flare on the back of the missile. The smoke generated by the missile can obscure your target, but you should always be able to see the flare. Try to make note of where it is before you fire, especially if it's moving. To begin with, you may find yourself moving the missile so it's directly in front of you, obscuring your own vision with the smoke, as this can feel easier. Over time, you'll learn to picture the missile's flight path alongside your own so that you can maintain a clear line of sight on the target. There's no simple way to explain missile guidance beyond practice. It's honestly better to get stuck straight in and learning, but I recommend making all of your big corrections as soon as possible after firing and leaving the fine-tuning till later on. Try to predict where your enemy will be and stop correcting the missile in the half second or so before it hits, as I find the last second corrections can throw you off. Also, be wary of your plane's direction as you fly and pull off if you're going to hit something. Missing your target and surviving is better than hitting your target and dying. You should also be looking to prioritize which targets you engage on the battlefield. Your first priority when spawning in should be to look for the telltale white streaks of a spawn kill 3000, also known as any 80 spawn point SAM system that can kill your 576 or above spawn point aircraft within 5 seconds of it appearing in the sky, along with 7 others, by pressing 3 buttons and vaguely moving the mouse from spawn. I wish I was joking. You may need to take evasive maneuvers almost immediately, so avoid going into a vertical climb straight away. Your first priority is, and always will be, SEAD, or suppression of enemy air defenses. In the real world, this is done with missiles such as the Shrike that home in on the radar emissions that an SPAA system emits, but we've got to make do with what we've got at the moment. As stated, they cost almost nothing and can ruin your match with almost no effort at all, so you need to prioritize them. You have a few options when an SPAA is engaging you. Within the first few seconds of spawning, you'll know if there's a SAM system. The telltale white lines and faint whooshing of the missile approaching, which doesn't really make sense because they travel faster than the speed of sound, will alert you to their existence. That SAM system is now your #1 priority to the exclusion of literally everything else. You can either drop low to the ground, circle around and wait for it to engage other friendlies, or stay in the air and dodge the missiles. There's a fine art to knowing just when to maneuver at the last possible second to evade the proximity detection range, and it takes a fair bit of getting used to. Nobody's perfect, and neither is defending against them by flying evasively, but these systems have limited missiles, and you can typically dodge a fair few of them reliably if you keep your speed up and stay a few kilometers away. When engaging an SPAA system, your options differ a little bit on if it's focused on you or if it has other targets to contend with. If the SPAA is distracted, engage with maximum prejudice. If it's focused on you and only you, your choices boil down to maximum aggression or being sneaky beaky. If you're going aggressive, fly straight at it, dodging the missiles while guiding your own in to take it out. Slight evasive maneuvers around your flight path, known as jinking, make you pretty unpredictable when doing this and can throw off the aim, especially if they're tracking you with their aiming radar. This is definitely the most high-risk, high-reward strategy. Your alternative involves a little bit of cunning and a little bit of luck. You can now use the nap of the earth to confuse the radar system and engage the SPAA system from a relative blind spot. At ground level, the radar reflections from trees and terrain create noise in the targeting system that make it impossible for an SPAA to accurately track you, as it cannot distinguish the aircraft from the terrain and ground reflections, meaning you can break the firing solution pretty reliably. Circle wide around the battlefield, anywhere from 90 to 180 degrees away from where you were last seen, turning around if possible, and wait for their attention spans to wear out. This doesn't usually take long, especially if there are other friendly aircraft in the air. Come in fast and low and smack them. Spawn protection lasts roughly 10 to 15 seconds if a vehicle doesn't move, and around 5 if they do. Keep that in mind. If someone spawns in and you dive on them straight away, aside from being pretty scummy, you're unlikely to get a kill. They will do it to you, but, you've got no spawn protection, so. You can also use the positioning of a vehicle against itself, especially on built-up maps. If you know where the vehicle is, for instance, on a road that faces north to south, you can set yourself up just outside a line of sight, approaching from the east or west, and curve an AGM into the area that the vehicle is in. You'll have to land it pretty close, but you can reliably use this to succeed. Take note of buildings or foliage near the SPAA, as they may block line of sight and make the gunner struggle to get a lock on you. Locks have to be made through the gun sight, and while the radar may not be blocked by the individual tree or bush, it's going to be much tougher to accurately aim at you to get the lock in the first place if they're looking down their sights through a tree. In order, and in my personal opinion, the Tunguska and ADATs are tied first in terms of difficulty to deal with, because they've got 8 missiles that they can just keep lobbing. Then the Flak Rakit and Panzer and Raland, because they can only fire 2 at a time. Then the Stormer, as while the trails aren't visible, which can throw you off while flying defensively, the people firing them seem to struggle more with aiming it accordingly. These are followed by the Type 96 and Sidam, Mistral, not sure, which are the only infrared SAM systems currently in the game. They track the heat signature of your exhaust. The missiles of the Type 96 are predictable and can typically be led astray by turning sharply. The Sidam Mistral, is it Sidam Mistral? Their missiles feel almost impossible to dodge in my experience, but the vehicle itself is pretty rarely seen on the battlefield. These are followed by gun SPAA. The M163, as well as the guns on the Sidam, have shorter ranges than systems like Gepard, AMX-30 DCA, and Shilka, but the tracers seem a fair bit less reliable, and you may find yourself dying despite seeing the tracers a fair distance away from you, so bear that in mind. The Swedish SPA is definitely one to look out for as well. The automatic and the M247 have proximity detonation shells. They can spook you a lot. Need to be aware of them. Respect the space around SPAA and always be mindful that it exists and can come into existence at any point. Bear in mind that you can still guide your missiles after being critically damaged, meaning if you launch directly at the SPAA that killed you, you can take it out even once you're burning up. You just got to remember to focus. After SPAA, your secondary priority is enemies that are about to cap or enemies that are capping zones. You are in the air, so it goes without saying that outside of some fringe meme situations that you're not going to manage in a bloody jet at top tier, you can't cap. If you see a tank going for a zone that's going to stop the enemy ticket bleed or start the ticket bleed in your favor, as in against you, you need to remove it as soon as possible to prevent a bleed that you cannot deal with from the air. At that point, your options are J'ing out and spawning in a tank or accepting the loss. Third priority is people your team is fighting. A lot of top tier tank battles happen as peeking engagements where both vehicles edge around a piece of cover or on berms to try and hit one another's breach or ammo rack. If you see enemies peeking your friendly units, take them out. Living friendly tanks means cap zones, which means you don't lose to a ticket bleed out while the ground crew duct tapes more missiles to your pylons. Your last priority is low-hanging fruit. People sitting still in mostly useless locations, not really doing much to alter the course of the battle. A kill is a kill, for sure, but you have limited ordnance and should always aim to do the maximum tactical damage whenever possible, as well as simply removing tanks from the battlefield. Remember that every single tank you kill is likely to be followed by someone spawning in SPAA for revenge kills. Watch your back in the 20 seconds following a kill, as there's a decent enough probability that someone will immediately spawn a Tunguska and try to ruin your day. Using AGMs is definitely a bit more intricate than using rockets or bombs, but the results can be great once you get to grips with it. I strongly recommend flying out into a test flight, practicing with them, practicing the guidance, getting to grips with how they can move and how, the speed at which they will fire, because it's going to take some getting used to. If you have any suggestions or requests for videos, I know my upload schedule is non-existent because I'm not really a YouTuber. Please drop them in the comments below, and if this video helped you, please let me know. I stream almost every day over at twitch.tv/Casfor, usually in the evenings British time, and I would love to see you drop by. Stay safe, fly fast, and strike hard. Good luck!